Today, we had the U.S. Senate give us its plan. They say we'll fix ObamaCare. We'll take a look at the details of that and the likelihood that it'll pass. But first, let's take a look at Illinois. It couldn't come at a more appropriate time to see the effects of the same types of progressive Democrat policies, from Barack Obama, who comes from Illinois. We have the Illinois comptroller putting it this way: the state can no longer function. This is truly a warning about Obamacare, folks. Zero Hedge puts it this way. They say with just 10 days to go until Illinois enters its third year without a budget, resulting in the state's imminent downgrade to junk status, potentially culminating in a default for the state whose unpaid bills now surpass $15 billion. The Democrat comptroller, Susana Mendoza, issued a warning to the Illinois governor and other elected officials on Tuesday, saying in a letter that her office has very serious concerns that it may no longer be able to guarantee timely, predictable payments. They say it's a massive crisis mode. She says this is not a false alarm. She said the state is effectively hemorrhaging money. She's very concerned. You get the idea? This is not something that is sustainable. This is like Venezuela. It's what we've seen in Detroit and other places where we have these types of socialist policies running through. They're running out of other people's money. They did it a long time ago. Now they're running out of rope that the bankers gave them to hang themselves. They've left the government spending roughly $600 million more a month than it is taking in. So they're $15 billion in debt, and they're going into debt about $500 million, a little bit more than that each month. Services more likely to be affected include long-term care, hospice, and supportive living centers for seniors. She added that managed care organizations that serve Medicaid recipients are owed more than $2.8 billion in overdue bills as of June 15th. Do you get an idea of where this is also coming in? It's the free health care that they want to give everybody, the subsidized health care, which is really not anything other than an entitlement. We're not talking about insurance anymore. We're talking about a government entitlement program with mandates, with transfer payments, with outright theft and violation of the law. That's what Obamacare is. That's why it must be repealed. We'll talk about that in a moment. But again, going back to this, she says the state can no longer function. We have to put our fiscal house in order. It is already too late. Action is needed. So then we see the Chicago Tribune, a kind of a tongue-in-cheek article saying, what do we do with a broken Illinois? Well, we have to dissolve the land of Lincoln. He said, Illinois is like Venezuela now. Exactly. It's a fiscally broken state that has lost its will to live. Although for the moment, they still have enough toilet paper, he points out. But he said, before they run out of essentials, let's finally admit that after decade upon decade of taxing, spending, borrowing, Illinois has finally run out of other people's money. They need a plan. Here it is. Dissolve it. Decommission the state. Tear up the charter. Whatever the legal mumbo-jumbo. Just end the whole dang thing. The people that he will scream the loudest, he said, are the politicians, because they're the ones who want it going. They're the ones who created it. They're the ones who are talking about bankruptcy. And he says, but, let's just split it up and give it to our neighbors, see which, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, what parts of this would you like to have? No, the Democrats aren't going to do any of that. They're going to continue to go down the same path. And first thing they're going to do is to try to raise taxes, because they're not going to cut any of these programs that make the politicians powerful. However, there's a problem with that. Moody's Investor Services says taxpayers are on the hook for $251 billion in unfunded public union pension liabilities. See, the $15 billion that they can't handle just out of regular operating expenses, and the $500 million a month that they're going into debt, increasing it, doesn't even touch the $251 billion that they're on hook for with pension plans. There's no way out of this for them. Yet, that's exactly what they want to do. They don't want to bring about structural reform that'll make it stable. And that's the situation that we see from the Senate Republicans. The Senate Republicans, the leadership. You have to understand that the establishment, the Republican establishments, are no different from the Democrats. They're using the same tactics, creating their secret bills and so forth. And then with the same goal in mind, keeping these massive government programs going. They're simply rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, even though they're already scraping the iceberg. But meanwhile, Obama from Illinois says that there's a fundamental meanness about the Senate health care bill. He said the Senate bill unveiled today is not a health care bill. It's a massive transfer of wealth from middle class and poor families to the richest people in America. Wait a minute. That's what his bill was. His bill transferred wealth from middle class and poor families to the richest people in America. the people who own the insurance companies. Okay, that's what is truly behind this. It was a massive transfer of wealth to the insurance companies. But he pretends that this is something that's going to hurt people. If they get sick, old, start a family, this bill will harm you, he said. And he said these small tweaks under the guise of making these bills easier to stomach. He understands that what he created is not easy to stomach. He says they can't change the fundamental meanness at the core of this legislation. No, they can't change the fundamental madness at the core of Obamacare. See, the problem is, and we talked about this with Jerome Corsi. He and I did a report about how they funded these subsidized health care policies. They're saying we provided 20 plus million people with health care. No, you didn't. You didn't even really provide them with health insurance. You stole money from people who had been responsible, who had invested money for their retirement or in other ways. You took it from private investors because the Congress never funded Obamacare. And of course, the whole Ponzi scheme, the whole Robin Hood scheme could be stopped simply by the Department of Justice under Attorney General Sessions stopping the appeal of the court that said, no, you have to follow the Constitution. It's the Congress that appropriates the money. They didn't appropriate the money, so that doesn't give you, President Obama, the license to steal it from somewhere else, which is what they did. It could be stopped that easily. Or it could be stopped like Representative Mo Brooks suggested, a single sentence. Obamacare is hereby repealed. No, we're not going to do that either. Instead, we're going to continue down this bankrupt moral principle here that we're going to rob investors to pretend to give health insurance to other people. You can't give anything, the government can't give anything to someone without first taking it from someone else. Also, they legally have no authority to do this. We know that it's not really a tax. It's not a tax when you force people to buy something from a private company. That's where the massive transfer of wealth went. They held the gun of government to people's head and said, buy this service from my preferred vendors at the rates that they have told me that they want to have. Let them set the rates. It's also, though, financially bankrupt. And that's the big deal. This is what's going to bite us. But we see the GOP using the same tactics as the Democrats, creating this bill in secret, then giving everybody just a few days to look at it. Now, this is not as complex as the original passing of Obamacare. This is a 142-page bill, but still, they only have a handful of days to decide whether they're going to support it or vote against it. It doesn't give the public much time to take a look at what's going on here and give feedback to the representatives. They're twisting people's arms by doing this. These are the same tactics created by the Democrats being adopted by the Republicans to continue Obamacare. Ted Cruz says, as currently drafted, this bill draft does not do nearly enough to lower premiums. He said the central issue for Republicans should be repealing Obamacare and making health care affordable. See, that's what Obamacare was called, was the Affordable Health Care Act. It was never affordable. Never affordable. It was simply about making people dependent on government. So let's take a look at some of the comparisons here between the Senate bill, between Obamacare and the House proposal. For example, Obamacare greatly expanded Medicaid and mostly paid for it, says CNN. Well, no, it didn't really. As we talked about, they stole the money from Fannie Gate subsidies and other things. The Senate bill would continue the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare for 3 years and then began to roll it back in 2021. Again, continue to expand it. So they're not even going to slow it down for 3 years. Obama guarantees coverage, even for people with pre-existing conditions. That's not insurance. That's an entitlement program funded again by theft. And quite frankly, it isn't funded. They're going to run out of that money, and they're not going to be able to continue down this road. We all know that we can't continue to see our insurance premiums under these mandates continue to double. The House bill would allow some states to opt out of requiring those protections. The Senate bill does not. But they'll allow in some states skimpier coverage. You can get waivers and so forth. You understand the problem with this? We have Health and Human Services Secretary becoming a health czar, a mandarin, a bureaucrat, standing in Washington, D.C., deciding what coverage people are going to be required to take, whether the states will be allowed to opt out, how much they'll be allowed to opt out, even the carrot that they're throwing to their supporters saying, we're going to defund Planned Parenthood for a year. That's just a temporary thing. You leave the structure in, and then the next time you have Democrats take power or you have some moderate or establishment Republicans take power, it all comes back in. This is not a change. This is not repeal. This is leaving the structure of Obamacare in. And if you leave it in, it will continue to grow and metastasize like a cancer through the society, taking us down just as Illinois is being taken down by this, just as we see with Venezuela. Obamacare required every health plan to cover certain essential benefits, and they would tell you what was essential. Things like maternity care for single men, things like that. Well, they're going to play around a little bit with that. Look, there's nothing here. This is a big nothing burger. This is as much a distraction as the Russians hacked the election. They're trying to claim that they've got a win here when they are not doing anything to fix the problem. It is not a win to pretend that you're fixing the problem and continue to allow this massive thing to tank us and to tank our freedoms, our legal structure, and our economy. Rand Paul says the Senate health care bill may be Obamacare Plus, as a matter of fact. He says it may have even more subsidies than Obamacare. And it subsidizes this death spiral that we're in. It does nothing to solve the cost that we've looked at. On Thursday's broadcast with Neil Cavuto, he said this. He said, when we look at the bill, we actually find that with the Obamacare subsidies, not only are we keeping them, we may be actually providing more subsidies than Obamacare has. Our early estimates on the bill are that the bill may spend more in the next year or two than Obamacare does. And so it's hard for us to get our mind around that it's a repeal bill if we're spending more, if we're keeping all the subsidies, and then we're going to start a brand new federal entitlement program where we give insurance companies money. See, that's just it. It's an entitlement program, but it's an entitlement program for the insurance companies. It's not helping us with health care. We have to understand that, first of all, this isn't going to pass. They have to have, they've got 4 Republican senators, which is way more than is needed to stop this bill. Rand Paul and 3 others are opposing this, and I say good for them. This is nothing at all like what Donald Trump campaigned on. Donald Trump had a program that was essentially going to institute market reforms. That's the only thing that is going to help us in terms of health care costs. We have to put these market reforms in. We have to have competition across state lines. If we go back and look at his health care reform, here's what he had. Competition across state lines. Remember Rubio saying lines? What's this about lines? No, there were lines that were stopping competition. That's what the Commerce Clause is really about. They've, of course, inverted that to do all sorts of unconstitutional things, but that was really what it was about, to allow competition across state lines. It also allowed ownership, which gave people incentive to save money. When you've got a third-party system that the federal government created with the IRS's assistance, where only businesses get to deduct their insurance cost, you have crippled the incentive to save money. It is completely gone if we go to a single-party payer system, which is where they want it to go. They want it to fail. They want it to go bankrupt so that the government takes it all over and just makes it a big entitlement program. This aids that by keeping the fraud going. In terms of taxes, some of the taxes are going to be cut partially here in this program, but we have to understand the difference in what Donald Trump campaigned on. Donald Trump said that we're going to replace penalties and taxes with tax credits and health savings accounts. We're going to give people ownership. We're going to reward people who do the right thing. And of course, there are always going to be people who don't have the money, who don't have access to the system. And that has always been handled in the past and should be with private charity, with the charity of the hospitals and the doctors. And they did that. And that is it's not a perfect system, but it is a far better system than this bankrupt system that we have here. Why can't we, if that's the goal, and healthcare is very important, why can't we even deduct our medical expenses or our health care insurance from our income tax? And of course, the taxes on medical devices that simply make it more expensive. He was going to remove barriers and regulations that make drugs more expensive, even if they're manufactured in the U.S., sent to another country, and we can buy them in another country cheaper. What is wrong with that? There's massive structural problems here. But then also choice and transparency to operate in that marketplace. To know that you can shop price, you can shop quality between doctors and hospitals. That's really what is necessary. And we don't see any of that here. Now let's talk about some good news today. On the welfare front, we see that Trump wants to ban immigrants from accessing welfare within 5 years of entering the U.S. Of course, why wouldn't we? There's no countries in the third world that allow you to move to their country and become a citizen if you don't have the means to support yourself and to support your dependents. But of course, they also control their borders. We're not allowed to do that in Western countries either. But people can come here illegally without our authorization and immediately start to get financial benefits. And he's saying, well, let's at least wait 5 years and wait for the hue and cry. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But when we look at the kind of waste that the government gives us all the time, let's take a look at the Pentagon. Pentagon, one of our favorite wasting programs, has wasted $28 million on uniforms for Afghan soldiers. What did they do? They bought them forest camouflaged uniforms in a country where only 2.1% of the total land area even has forests. Maybe when they said we need uniforms for the Afghan forces, they thought they said Afghan forests. No, that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, why did they do it? It's because their defense minister liked the look of the uniforms. And the person exposing this said, the inspector general said, what if he liked pink or purple? Would we do that too? Would we make special custom uniforms because he liked that? That is the insanity of the government programs, and that is why we don't want them running our healthcare. Stay with us. We have a very important report on electronic voting coming right up.
We've taken thousands of years of known research and put it together with our own 4 years of seeking and testing to find the very best systems that God gave us through Mother Nature to detoxify the body. That's why I'm introducing Z-Shield, Toxic Metal and Chemical Defense Support. It's made in the USA. It's filled with known compounds from nature that are absolutely associated with detoxifying the body, and it supports the InfoWar. It is a classical 360 win. Our formula at InfoWarsLife.com is, quite frankly, simple. We go out and look at the recognized research, and we take it to the next level of quality, of purity, and of strength. Because this is what I personally use for myself and my family. We've gone through 5 or 6 different permutations in the last 4 years since we launched InfoWars Life to actually come up with this. This is the formula that I personally have been taking for over a year, and now we believe we have come as close to perfection when it comes to a detoxifier as you can possibly get. If you're not mitigating the pesticides, the heavy metals, the chemicals, if you're not trying to purify your water, if you're not trying to take products like Z-Shield that are full of known concentrated compounds that help purify our cells and our bodies, you're crazy. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and you owe it to the future of this country and the world that patriots stay as healthy and as clean and as focused as you can be, because we need you, the remnant of America, to reignite those brush fires to the next level and to be healthy and as focused as you can be. Because if you're sick, if you're over there on the sidelines and not in the fight, you're basically giving in to the New World Order. Thanks to your support and your prayers, together, we're changing the world. Now it's time to change our bodies with Z-Shield at InfoWarsLife.com.